Today we're going to be addressing a reader question that was sent in to us by a teacher in Prince George's County, Maryland. And I think I know a person who can address this question much more knowledgeably than I can. So we're going to be giving Brianna White a call. Brianna is the director of the Student and Teacher Programs at the National Portrait Gallery. And we have her on the line. So Brianna, we're so excited to be talking with you today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us today. As we're recording, this isn't going to air probably for at least another couple of weeks, but as we're talking today, we're right in the wake of the presidential portrait unveiling. So I know you guys have been really busy. We super appreciate you taking the time today, this morning, to chat with us.
Of course, my pleasure.
So we're talking about teachers utilizing museums for arts integration in this episode. But before we get into that, I have a question I wanted to ask you that comes from a reader named Paige, who says, I teach at a middle school that is geographically very close to Washington, D.C., and I would love to take advantage of the amazing museums located there. She talks about sometimes there's struggles with getting busing companies because DC technically counts as being out of state when it comes to busing. But my question for you is, how can we allow students to access some of the great resources that you guys have to offer if maybe they're not able to get into the city because of transportation costs or also just because of distance? Not everyone is located in a drivable distance to the National Portrait Gallery. So I was just wondering, I know you're not like a magician, but do you have any thoughts on ways to bring art to students who maybe can't access it in person?
Sure, of course. Over the past, I would say, couple of years at the Portrait Gallery, one of my focuses has been on actually adding more resources to our website for teachers and for students who can't make the trip to DC and to the Portrait Gallery. So for those people who can't come, if they come to our website, which is npg.si.edu, in the Learn section, it is the one-stop shop for all things education at the Portrait Gallery. There's a section for teachers. Within that section, there's a page for classroom resources. And that's the best place to go to start. We host a teacher resource guide about reading portraiture, what it means to read portraits, why we read portraits. But I guess my favorite part of that classroom resources page is the portrait spotlights. And those portrait spotlights are images that we have had success using in the museum. What we've done is the image is located there along with biographical information, historical information, portrait information about those artworks. But then as you scroll to the bottom of each of the portrait spotlights, you'll see looking questions. Ways to engage with students about those specific artworks. And then some of the images also have extension activities that you can do as well.
That's awesome. It reminds me a lot, actually, of Artful Thinking, which I'm pretty sure you guys are familiar with because I've done a couple PDs, like I mentioned, at the National Portrait Gallery, and we've done some Artful Thinking stuff. But it's nice to have those go-to questions listed with the artwork so that it's kind of this very ready-made resource for teachers with the questions already laid out for them. That's really nice and clean.
Exactly. I highly recommend our Reading Portraiture Guide for educators because it does wind up being that really great foundational document. If you want to read portraits with your students, start with this guide because it goes through what we call the elements of portrayal, which are the 10 visual elements that you really should ask questions about, tease out with your students if you want to tell the story of the portrait. That's the best place to start. So start there, go to the portrait spotlights. The other really wonderful resource that I do want to mention is Learning Lab, which is actually it's a digital platform. It's learninglab.si.edu, and it is something that is used across the Smithsonian. It was created by the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access, and it is basically the Smithsonian's educational digital platform by which you can combine the collections of the Smithsonian with other resources, and teachers can create collections.
I've used that before. I didn't do it by the website that you had listed, but I'm sure like if I saw the site itself, I would have recognized it. Yeah. That before. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is. I think by far it's probably it's one of the best resources that's come out of the Smithsonian, which allows teachers to use the collections of the entire Smithsonian, not just one museum. And we have at the Portrait Gallery used Learning Lab with our Summer Teacher Institute participants. So if teachers search by hashtag NPGTeach, they'll come up with all of the collections that Portrait Gallery staff has created, but also Summer Teacher Institute participants, which I think is a really nice way of seeing how teachers are using our collections in the classroom.
Yeah, that's a really nice resource too for doing any sort of like curational activities. I don't know if curational is a word. Curating activities.
Yes.
Okay, so I do have a quick follow-up question.
Sure.
If teachers, have the funding to transport students to the National Portrait Gallery, they live in a relatively close distance, what does the process look like for scheduling a field trip with you guys? Do you have to call a year in advance? How early do they have to contact you? That sort of thing.
Sure. So we our process is online. If you again go to our website under the Learn section, you'll visit Student Visits.
Okay.
There you'll see all of the visits, all the programs that we offer, and the form to fill out is online. We offer programs October through June of each academic year. We generally ask teachers to start registering for programs in August. Okay. For the upcoming academic year. And then it's just a rolling registration process. We generally ask about a month in advance. I would say we offer our programs at 2 time slots during the morning hours before the museum opens to the public, both 9:30 and 11 o'clock. We open at 11:30, so it's really nice to be able to bring students in before we open to the public. Our 11 o'clock time slots fill up very quickly. I would say by October, November, of the academic year. And then the 9:30 slot will start to fill up after the 11 o'clock time slot does. So there isn't any deadline, but once a teacher submits the form, then myself or one of my colleagues will be in touch to either confirm the program easy if we have space in the calendar, or to discuss alternate dates if that time slot is already booked up.
Perfect. And then once teachers are at the museum, is there a docent-led tour, or how do you suggest that teachers maximize their time with students at the National Portrait Gallery?
Well, I always recommend that if a teacher is bringing students to the museum, that they try and schedule a guided program with us first. Mm-hmm. Our gallery educators are the ones who facilitate the student programs here, and they have been trained to connect with the collection, to work with students. We believe very strongly in object-based, inquiry-based learning. Our gallery educators don't give talking head tours. It is all about the discussion and the dialogue. And I really feel like their job is to facilitate that meaning making for the students. We really want students to have that aha moment when they're in the museum, where they've made some sort of connection to the portrait that they see. Maybe it is relevant to their own lives, maybe it's relevant to their curriculum, whatever it is. So our gallery educators are the ones that facilitate. And like I said, all programs are inquiry-based. For our younger audience, we do some sketching and some writing. Each program, though, is about 75 minutes long, but we're always willing to customize a program to meet a teacher's needs if the programs that we offer are not exactly what they're looking for.
Oh, that's really good to know.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so my next question kind of ties in, I think, with what you were saying about making all of the experiences students have at National Portrait Gallery really inquiry-based and meaning-making. So at Education Closet, we choose to focus on arts integration and like STEAM learning. And so that basically encompasses the idea that you can use visual artwork to help express ideas in other content areas. So, and also facilitate interdisciplinary learning, that sort of thing. I'm wondering if you have any ideas or suggestions about ways teachers can leverage portraits specifically in their arts integration lessons in the classroom, or in any museum, but just in general, how teachers can incorporate portraits into content lessons.
Right. So how do I start with this? Because arts integration is very much what we are all about. Absolutely. So the Portrait Gallery's mission is crystal clear. We tell the story of America through the people who have shaped it. In the scheme of things, we're a fairly young museum, but we are celebrating our 50th anniversary this year, which we are very excited about. So the portraits that hang on the walls and sit on the pedestals are of people that our students know from their history textbooks, maybe documentaries that they've seen, books that they've read. And so basically the easiest of connections that we can make with the portraits is to our history. The Portrait Gallery considers portraits through three lenses, through, of course, the art lens, we have to do that, through the biography lens, and through the history lens. We consider this museum is a museum of those three disciplines, and we don't really ever separate those disciplines. So if we're talking about a portrait of George Washington, our Lansdowne portrait of George Washington, we're certainly talking about the artist and the symbols, but we're also talking about Washington, his biography, and what all of those symbols might mean within his portrait. So in the easiest of senses, we absolutely are all about arts integration and connecting the art with the biography and the history. What I have tried to do over the past few years is to make even more connections with other disciplines. I would say we've learned very quickly, working with teachers and working with students, that portraits wind up being wonderful writing prompts. We can springboard into creative writing, persuasive writing, many different types of writings, by using portraits in our collection. And we've even been known to connect to science and to math as well. Science, very easy, depending on who's portrayed in the portrait. And math, we like to use the angles and the shapes that we see within some of our objects to start thinking about math concepts.
Yeah.
So arts integration, absolutely.
Yay! I'm glad to hear it. So that being said, I also wanted to say, actually, before we moved on, that I loved the language used earlier about reading a portrait, because I think it's so often that we, when we think about portraiture or any visual art, we say, oh, I'm looking at it, or maybe I'm like analyzing it, but it's really rare that I hear the literary term read being associated with visual art. So that's a really interesting, like, linguistic connection that you guys are making as well, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, we are really trying to make that connection between literacy that the students are learning in the classroom with visual literacy of reading images. And so, you obviously, you're reading a book in very similar ways to reading an artwork, and vice versa. And the idea with these elements of portrayal is that many of those elements can be transferred to reading other artwork as well, not just portraits.
And not that anyone wants to teach to a test, but just so that, it's just an additional support of this, is that the PARCC test, which is the standardized test that most schools are now using, involves not only having, they call it it's called a text. So students might have to have a writing prompt based off of a short story, but there could also be a visual text involved where they do have to use like a literary analysis almost of a visual text, which is really interesting to me, and also totally ties in with what you guys are doing. So if nothing else, it's on the PARCC test, so there's a good reason to use it. I don't know. There's one reason to use it, whether that's good or not. Okay, so I also wanted to talk to you about specific programs that the National Portrait Gallery offers. I know that you guys offer student visits. We talked about that a little bit. You also have some cool programming. I saw the Explore Foundations of Portraiture for preschoolers, the Portrait Detectives for kindergarten through third grade, Shaping America for grades 4 through 8, America's Presidents, also the Art of Portraiture for grades 4 through 12, Portrait Conversations and Voices of Social Justice for grades 6 through 12. I think all of your programs sound amazing, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about the last program I just mentioned, the social justice program for the secondary students. It seems like a really relevant offering. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on this program that you guys are offering to secondary students right now.
Sure, of course. This program really began because the Portrait Gallery has a permanent exhibition called The Struggle for Justice. And this particular exhibition, which just so happens to be my favorite of our permanent exhibitions, really highlights people who've been fighting for rights or fighting against injustice from, I would say, probably the mid to end of the 19th century to today. And so originally the program was specifically in this one exhibition. But then we realized that as you walk through our galleries, and like I said before, we are a museum of history, so we like to think about things chronologically. When you walk through our permanent exhibitions, you start to see all of these other individuals who have been fighting for rights, fighting for marginalized or disenfranchised groups throughout the gallery spaces. So Voices of Social Justice really takes a broad look at our collection of what's on display, thinking about those people that have been fighting for these groups. Some of my favorite portraits that are in this program are we have a portrait of Cesar Chavez, along with 4 other individuals called The Return to Aslan. We have a beautiful portrait of Eunice Kennedy Shriver that was commissioned for the Portrait Gallery and was installed back in 2009. In this program, we also have Harriet Tubman. We have a great photograph of her on view right now, which is amazing because there aren't that many photographs of Harriet Tubman. So for us to have one is fantastic. And, you know, photographs very much wind up being a really true and accurate likeness. John Brown is in this program, Belva Ann Lockwood, Russell Means. So it does wind up being my favorite. And I've also noticed that for whatever reason, you know, these portraits that are in this program too are also really rich and compelling and provide the start for a really great conversation, especially our portrait of Rosa Parks. Sorry.
You're totally fine. Real life. I think that I used to teach at a secondary school, and this program seems to fit really well with a lot of the concepts that kids are learning as they go through 7th and 8th grade. Specifically, you know, we start debate as a language arts subtopic. Someone needs to get in touch with you.
Sorry.
Fine. But anyway, I just think it goes hand in hand really well with the existing classroom stuff that kids are learning during that age range, and really relevant also to life outside of school right now in 2018.
Right, I agree. I mean, I think that I think that it is so important for our students who are, sorry.
You're fine.
I think it is so important for our students who we want to be civically engaged to be inspired by those people that have come before them, right? Yeah. So I think that that's one of the reasons why this program is really popular and is really engaging for students.
Okay. I want to be mindful of your time. I know people are going to get in touch with you. I just have 2 more quick questions. One is, I know that you offer some great professional development style programs for educators. I told you I've taken a couple of them. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what those look like and how to get involved as an educator if you want to attend professional development at National Portrait Gallery.
Sure, of course. So during the academic year, I host anywhere between 5 to 7 professional development workshops. And these workshops are specifically for local teachers, although teachers obviously are more than welcome to come in from out of town. It just doesn't happen very often during the academic year. Our programs, these teacher workshops, are either on Tuesday nights or Saturday during the day. I really wanted a mixture of both because I know that Some teachers like evenings and some teachers like weekends, so I wanted that mix. Each year, the teacher workshops that I offer really are a mixture of taking a close look at specific exhibitions that we have on view, or thinking about specific strategies or ways to engage with portraiture. So earlier this year, we had, I held a teacher workshop in conjunction with our exhibition, The Sweat of Their Face, Portraying American Workers, which is really taking a look at the visual history of labor and laborers in the United States. But then in just a couple of weeks, we're taking a look at how you can use portraiture to explore identity and thinking about it in terms of STEAM. So I'm partnering up with an IB biology teacher, and we're going to be taking a look at genetics and thinking about portraits and how portraits reveal and conceal and all of that. So not tied to a specific exhibition, but more about strategy for using portraiture as a whole. So that's during the year.
Yeah.
But the summertime is when we offer our summer teacher institutes. We offer 2 a summer. This summer, they are going to be 5 days each. So the first one is June 25th through the 29th, and then the second one is July 9th through the 13th. There's an application process to this, but it is an opportunity for teachers to come in and spend a week with the Portrait Gallery, taking a deep dive into the collection, working with educators, working with the curators, being introduced to Learning Lab, learning how that works, creating a collection using a Portrait Gallery image as its foundation.
Cool.
Those are the opportunities that we have, and more information is on our website about those.
Okay, perfect. We'll link it in the show notes.
Excellent.
So you guys just had a huge event happen last week with the presidential portrait unveiling.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about your personal experience. Not everyone gets to be present for such a big event like that, and I was wondering what it was like for you, as part of the art world, as someone who's working at the National Portrait Gallery, just what that experience was like.
It was really wonderful. I mean, it was a week ago today, or a week ago yesterday, actually. Staff were invited to the unveiling of President Obama and Mrs. Obama's portraits. Kahindi Wiley created the portrait of President Obama. Amy Sherrill created the portrait of Mrs. Obama. They're truly wonderful. I mean, they are fantastic representations of both of those individuals. I love that they chose the artists that they did. Both of the portraits are really meaningful, I think, to the Obamas because they tell a story about them. They have prides of place in exhibitions in the museum right now. When you walk from our Struggle for Justice exhibition and you walk into America's Presidents, President Obama's portrait is the first one that you will see. So capstoning America's Presidents is George Washington on one side and President Obama on the other side. And then when you enter the museum via our G Street entrance, Michelle Obama's portrait is the first that you will see when you walk into Portrait Gallery space. The lines have been tremendous. Truthfully, it has been a whirlwind. But we are over the moon thrilled here. And teachers have been so excited for these portraits that they have been asking to see them on the programs that have already been scheduled. And then we've been getting a ton of more registrations for teachers who want to bring their students to see them.
Yeah, I totally believe it. I know that I did not know the artist prior to the unveiling. I don't know, that was public knowledge, but I just was unaware of it until I saw it. I was like, oh my God, Kahindi Wiley did the presidential portrait. That's amazing. I was totally surprised because I just had not, I guess, researched it or looked into it beforehand. And it's so, I think, breaking with tradition in so many ways, but also still keeping in line with like telling the story of the background of President Obama. And I know he talked a little bit about like the symbolism in he gave a speech at the unveiling, right? I didn't listen to it, but I read some articles about it, and he talked a little bit about the symbolism that he used,
Yeah.
which I think can really tie in too in terms of arts integration with, once again, reading portraiture and understanding some of the subtleties that come with portraiture art.
Right, right. Absolutely. There are many types of flowers in President Obama's portrait, and Kehinde Wiley talked about the flowers that he placed in there as really being President Obama's path. So there are African blue lilies representing Kenya, which is where his dad is from. There is jasmine representing Hawaii, which is where he grew up. And then there's the chrysanthemum, which is the flower for Chicago, where he really started his political career. So it's just over the moon.
Yeah, endless possibilities for teachers who are interested.
Absolutely.
The presidential portraits. Okay, so before you go, I was wondering if you could tell us about any exciting current or upcoming exhibitions happening at National Portrait Gallery that students and teachers can access either by visiting in person or by visiting the website, but also specifically, I think in person, what you guys have going on or coming up in spring of 2018.
Sure. So I already mentioned the Sweat of Their Face, which will be on view, I believe, until September. So definitely come take a look at that show. The two new exhibitions that we have coming up are, one is called Unseen, Our Past in a New Light, and it is the artwork of Ken Gonzalez-Day and Titus Kafar. And that exhibition is really taking a look at the presence of absence of people of color in American portraiture. So it is contemporary artwork, and that will be on the, that will be on the lower level of the museum on the F Street side. So that's actually opening in just another month. And then I'm really excited for a show called Blackout, Silhouettes Then and Now. It's not very often that we show silhouettes in our collection in the museum. So this show will be all about silhouettes that we've had in our collection for quite some time. But then we're also having some contemporary portraitists come in and install work. So the work of Kara Walker will be in that exhibition. So I think taking a look at silhouettes from history in conjunction with silhouettes from now, and how really silhouettes were a way to democratize portraiture, right? Because they were less expensive to create, whereas oil-painted portraits is very much an elitist art form.
Materials and cost. That's so interesting. I never think about silhouettes as being like a sub-genre of portraiture, but it so totally is. That's going to be an amazing exhibition. That sounds really cool.
Yes. We're over the moon thrilled for both of those.
Okay, well, clearly you're a very busy woman. I'm so glad you were able to stop by today. We really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us and to chat this morning. I just super appreciate it. Thanks so much for being here.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, thanks so much and have a great day.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.